the Impostor Syndrome Files. I am so grateful that you're here, and I really hope that you've been enjoying the conversations that you've been listening to, and hopefully finding some tips, some next steps that you can take if you struggle with similar feelings of self-doubt, which obviously, as you're hearing, are fairly universal. This is something that we all go through from time to time. When I started this podcast, my goal was really to try to normalize the experience, to let everybody know that you are not alone, that there's a name for what you're feeling, and that there are steps that we can be taking to manage it more effectively. What I have found over the course of these conversations has been fascinating. I have had an absolutely powerful and different conversation with every single person who I have interviewed. I worried at one point that there may not be enough to talk about. How much is there to say about imposter syndrome? Are the stories going to start to get repetitive? That has absolutely not been the case. Everyone brings a fascinating new perspective to this conversation. I have learned something from every discussion that we've had. I hope you have too. I want to make a note that many of these recordings are being done during the social distancing that's happening with coronavirus. I am doing my best to protect the sound quality, but we are all in homes that have pets, kids, all kinds of background noise going on. For me, it's much more important to share with you a very natural conversation between two people than it is to share a perfectly polished recording. So I hope that you will bear with us if there are moments where the sound is not perfect. Really, my goal is to share stories, not to provide perfectly scripted, perfectly polished audio. So apologies for any imperfections that may be coming through in the recordings, but I'm hoping that you're getting the essence of the message regardless. So thank you again for being here. I wish you all the best and hope that you will consider sharing your own story one day. Thanks again. Okay, welcome, Maeve. I'm so happy to have you here today. And I'd love to start just by asking you to share a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Kim. I'm really pleased to be here as well. Well, Maeve O'Byrne, who am I? Well, I'm a mum of two adult boys. I'm a coach, a transition strategist and change strategist. I'm an Irish woman who was brought up in the Middle East, who now lives on the west coast of Canada. I'm in my fourth career these days, and really enjoying this part of my life, the beginning of my third act, as it were.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I hope we can talk a little bit about some of those prior life experiences too. You really caught my attention when you mentioned growing up in the Middle East.
Yes. People say, well, that must have been different. And my response is always, well, it was normal for me and my siblings, but yes, it was different to the experiences many of you will have had. We were living in the Middle East, and then at a certain age we were sent to boarding school. So I, at the age of just turned 10, I was sent to boarding school in Wales because my parents didn't want us to learn Gaelic, Irish Gaelic, it being a language that was no longer used, as a dead language and no longer useful, although they were both fluent Gaelic speakers. And so we went to boarding school in Wales and learnt to speak French. And Irish Gaelic is actually alive and continues to do well. And I think it's a regret that all of my siblings and myself had that we didn't have that opportunity. I'm one of 6. So when I was sent to boarding school at 10, it was basically the last time that we had a gathering, family gathering, or lived as a family in terms of what would be normally viewed as family life.
Wow. Wow, that's really interesting. And I'm curious, since we're talking about imposter syndrome, what does imposter syndrome mean to you, and how has it shown up in your life? It sounds like you've had a lot of transitions, which are common triggers of imposter syndrome. What's been your experience with this?
For me, imposter syndrome is it's almost like acting in a play. It's pretending to be something that you're sure you're not, and you're desperately afraid that somebody's going to find you out and show you up. I think it's basically a lack of confidence in who you are and how you've achieved something. And the fact is, often you've achieved it in a way that's not perhaps the expected manner. You haven't gone through the right schools or through known the right people. You sort of got there. And therefore, it's almost like, I don't really deserve to be here, and people will find out, and then I'll be exposed.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point too about the non-traditional path. I've certainly heard that a lot from people who feel like they don't have on paper the expected credentials, the right steps to have taken to get to where they are, and it feels almost illegitimate to them that they are where they are.
Yeah, it's almost like you've got into the club, and you're just waiting for somebody to recognize the fact that you're not supposed to be there.
Yes, and throw you out. Exactly. Now, has this been something that has affected you personally at all?
Oh gosh, yes. I was I left school when I was 15, 16, and had the dubious pleasure of going to finishing school, and then going to live for the first time in Ireland at the age of 16, 17, and taking a sort of business / secretarial course, and then going off and doing bookkeeping and working as a bookkeeper for a number of years before finding myself in a variety of different jobs until I found nonprofit management. And there was an immediate recognition and a fit. And so I was working in the nonprofit management field in developing events, working with people. And 20 years later, I found myself in Canada as the CEO of a hospital foundation. And so that, just being in that position with people working for me with not just their bachelor's, but maybe their master's, and me not even finishing school, not having done A levels, I'd only done O levels, feeling very much the imposter. I'm going to open my mouth one day and suddenly they'll all realize how stupid I am.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a classic thought. And so you had a couple of different transitions too, in terms of taking on such a high level role and also being in another country.
Yes.
How did you work through that? What steps did you take? I mean, how did you keep yourself sane during those times when you were worried that someone was going to find out?
Well, I think I question whether I kept myself sane. I think there were times during that period where people might have questioned my sanity. One of the things I think many of us do is we work twice as hard to try and hide what we think are the cracks that are showing. And I got to the stage where I was just exhausted, absolutely stressed out and exhausted. And my physician had said to me, "You need a break. You have got to, because otherwise you will end up in hospital." And so I decided to take a couple of months of unpaid leave and really sort of sit down and figure out, what I was going to do. Because I think at that stage, I was also the single mum at that stage of two small boys. So I needed to put some strategies into place to help manage myself, but also be a good example to them. And so one of the things I did was my eldest son at that stage had some difficulty with his reading and his writing. And so I said, I wonder, is it dyslexia? Because I have a niece and a nephew who are both dyslexic. And so when we went for testing, they wanted to test me. And it turned out that I had severe dyslexia as well.
Oh.
Which, I'd always had problems with spelling. And as long as I could read the work to myself out loud and manage it, I was fine. And then I would also try and memorize any public talks I had to give, because I knew I would get stuck on one or two of the words, having to read it out loud in front of people. So just by acknowledging that gave me sort of this great a burden seemed to lift from my shoulders. Okay, dyslexia, I know how to deal with that now. And then I decided, what is the biggest burden I wear at this particular time? And it turned out, after some work, it was the fact that I felt uneducated. I felt I hadn't, the lack of education for me was the biggest burden. And so one of our universities here offers a mixed entry course. So they look at the work you've done, the education you've got, and your experience and work, and you can take on degrees and graduate courses with them through that experience. And so I had hired a coach actually at this stage to help me work through sort of some of the challenges. And it was suggested that I take the coaching course at this university. So I did. I went and got my coaching certificate. And that gave me a taste of education that was not nearly as challenging or as fearful as the one I'd had 20 years previously. And so I went on from there to do a graduate certificate in leadership, and eventually did a master's degree in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on conflict and change. And sort of, okay, now I'm much better educated. It was a real change in output, going from someone who doesn't think they can do this to, wow, I did do it, and I did okay in it.
That's so interesting to me what you're talking about, because there is, and I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, because I applaud the fact that you took action and thought to yourself, one of the biggest gaps for me in terms of my confidence and my ability to believe that I'm the right fit for what I do is this lack of education, right? So instead of getting stuck there and feeling like, just this chronic state of being less than, you decided, I'm going to go fill that gap, right? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find a way to boost my education. And it sounds like that was a really good decision for you and that it worked out well.
Yes. And this was when I did the first certification, I was already in my 40s. So I had had 20 plus years of doubting and fear that this stupidity would show up. So that first year, that first graduate certificate was probably, I lost pounds in sweat and fear. Now I think back on it. But I realized it was the only way I could move forward and move out of that place of constant, and it was a place of constant fear that I would be found out, that I would be found to be stupid, and all of those things that I had imagined in my moments of self-doubt.
I have a question for you too, though, because it sounds like in your case, that was the right decision and it worked out well for you. Sometimes when I talk to women, though, I feel like getting more education can be a trap, that there's this sense that if I just study harder, if I just get another degree, if I go back and get a certification, that's going to solve this problem. And so people will spend a lot of time and energy investing in education that's not really necessary. They're not addressing the root cause of what's going on. How do you draw the line? Because I could imagine that might have been possible for you too if you had kept going, right? If you had just kept saying, okay, well, now I need this. Now I need a PhD, right? Right? As a fellow coach, how do you think about that conundrum?
Yeah, you're right. I think, and I'd love to go off and do. I've discovered learning, and it's just, I like this. This is a comfortable place to be, and it's fun. It was, I think, because for me, all of my siblings, I'm one of 6. And so I had been brought up, and it goes down back to sort of that sibling rivalry piece as well. I'd been brought up to be told that I wasn't as smart or as clever as my big sisters. And of course, the boys were the boys and the girls. And therefore, I was never that smart, never that intelligent, but never mind, something would find me. And so when I went to do my master's, only one of my siblings was on that path. And I realized that I'd already proved myself by doing the certifications, but this was something I wanted to do for myself. And the fact that I not only had applied and got in, but was chugging along nicely on that pathway in an area that I was really interested in, satisfied that need. I had gone in it to prove to myself more than, as well as to get rid of this this overarching feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And so getting to that place, it was probably about halfway through my degree, and I was working full time and still a full-time mum with boys. The fact that I was able to juggle all that and still get good marks, and my confidence had grown by that stage as well. So I was confident enough to actually argue with some of the professors that I didn't agree with, or that had sort of commented on an essay I'd written or something. And I would say, actually, no, I don't think that's right. I think those sort of signs, those were signs for me that, yep, you can do it. You've got the intelligence, you've got the smartness. It doesn't matter what you do. This just demonstrates to you, it addresses those issues that you struggled with about not being the smartest person in the room or not having a degree. You've got it now.
I think what you're saying too that's really important is that you are doing that for yourself.
Yes.
And I think that's a big difference, and maybe an important question for others who might be listening and wondering, is that going to help me is to really think about why am I doing it? Right.
Exactly. Yes. To ask that question. Initially, I sort of, because I'd had such a good experience with the executive coach, I thought that's a really neat way of working with others. And I really like how the coach approach. And then once I got into that rhythm of learning, it was sort of, I feel really good. I feel I'm sort of grown, and I've got less I've got more confidence in going out there. Maybe I should do something more. And with each of those, I recognized that it built up my confidence. And then with the masters, it was just, this sounds really interesting. And yes, it would be great to have on my resume. However, I really like to do it for me.
Mm.
And that, I think that really is key. Once you get to the stage where you're not doing it because of what others think, or because it sort of soothes that, I'm not good enough feeling, that's when you know you're sort of overcoming that, the imposter syndrome that's been bugging you in that area of life anyway.
Mm.
Because I think imposter syndrome can take various forms in various parts of your life as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of that is this fundamental motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So you have been coaching.
Yes.
Does this come up in coaching sessions and with your clients? Do you see this in others?
Yes, it does. And sometimes it comes up in when people talk about confidence, or I think I've lost my confidence. And you start to ask, well, tell me, what does that look like? How does that feel? And it's imposter syndrome. And sometimes I'll say, have you heard of imposter syndrome? Do you know what it is? And people, I think more so now, recognize what it is. And how does that fit on the way you feel? And so we can explore how it appeared, or where it appeared in their life. And again, going back to, why are you doing this? Why are you exploring this area? Is it for others, or is it for you? Because as you so aptly recognized, unless you do it for you, it'll continue. It's like a bad hangover. It'll just continue to sit up on top of your head there.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's never enough, right? I feel like if we're always trying to measure up to the invisible standards of others and comparing ourselves to other people, there's always one more thing that we feel we need to do.
Exactly. And that's that whole invisible standard piece. It's, I often talk to my clients about the monkey brain. Our monkey mind has this great aptitude to make up stories. And our job is to sort of pull it aside and start working through why those stories aren't true. And, they will, it will make up stories about what people think about us, what, where they would put us in their hierarchy of best people, all sorts of things. And it's really about coming back to ourselves and being comfortable and confidence. What will bring us confidence?
You're absolutely right. And I love that way of thinking about it, the monkey brain and the stories, because I think that part of even getting to a place where we can think about it differently is recognizing that it's a story in the first place, right? Because I think so many of us accept as fact what we tell ourselves.
Yep. Exactly. we all hear that, oh, we are sort of talk to yourself as you would talk to a good friend, and yet we still go back to that place where we beat ourselves up constantly about issues or things we've done, and doing so wouldn't isn't going to change that. And it's really learning to catch ourselves at that point where we can see the tunnel coming and monkey mind pulling us down, and really getting curious about, okay, this is something I'm working on. What triggered this thought to come up right now? What was it? What was I doing? What was I thinking? Or what was happening around me? And learning how to start catching those thoughts before they morphosize into something else, or into something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And as we do that, I know from my own experience, my ability to catch those thoughts and then really focus on them and think about, now, what happened here? What triggered this? Has really helped me grow and move from that whole imposter syndrome way of thinking.
I love this conversation that we're having because you're really hitting on two of the key strategies that I have used personally. And I've shared a lot about my own struggles with anxiety and the fact that my mind can be a really dark place. This whole concept of catching your thoughts has been so powerful to me, and really trying to get in there before they get too far ahead of me has been really, really powerful. And then the other piece to that I have found to be helpful is the idea of taking action, doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that, to me, anxiety is only useful to the extent that it allows me to take a different action, to do something, and not to just get stuck in it. And so if I catch my thoughts and recognize, oh, I'm beating myself up, and just having that dialogue with the inner critic, right? There are ways in which I can reframe my thoughts and keep myself from getting too far ahead. But also there are times when there may legitimately be something that I can be doing differently, something that will help me to feel more confident, that will help me to feel more competent in what I'm doing. And that's where I think, going back to what you were describing earlier, as being very strategic about the education that you choose to invest in really comes into play too, because sometimes we really do have opportunities to grow and invest in ourselves that can help build our confidence.
Yes, 100%. And for me, it's really interesting to catch myself, particularly if I can catch myself at the beginning of going down that pathway. What is it I have been doing? What's happening around me? What triggered me to go down that path? And it's coaching has helped in a lot of ways, because it's sort of allowed me to frame questions even to myself around these stories that we carry with us, and they're so deeply embedded in us that they'll sneak in. It's like the water through the stones; it'll sneak in any which way it can. Yeah, and so I think anything that we can do to really sort of sit there at the sort of above ourselves and watch our brain sort of chunk around and move in and say, no, not that direction. Why are you doing that? What was it? What happened just now that you've decided that's the right path? Is I think that's so helpful for us, and certainly, you mentioned working with clients as a coach. That's one of the things I often ask clients to go away and literally watch their thoughts. Where they found that they've gone down sort of some sort of pathway. Okay, watch what's happening before those thoughts occur. Go back and look at what occurred. And how did you feel? Or go back and think about your body. And was there somewhere in your body that sort of gave you an advanced warning? Did your stomach start hurting? Or did you get a ringing in your ear? Or was there some sort of sign that sort of your body's telling you, no, don't go there, and you ignore it?
I love that. I think that's such great advice to anybody listening who may be struggling with similar challenges. And I feel like I could talk to you for so much longer and I have so many more questions. But I'd love to wrap up just by asking you, what motivated you to want to tell your story today? What are you hoping that people take away from it?
I think that everybody has imposter syndrome at some stage of their life. The lucky ones don't get stuck there, but many of us do. And often it comes from maybe just one incident in our childhood, teen years that caught us in an unexpected moment and has lived with us as an unwelcome guest in our minds, perhaps. And that everybody goes through imposter syndrome at any time. And the most courageous thing that you can do is recognize it and figure out, or get help to figure out, how you can move from there and use that experience to grow further and help others.
What a beautiful way to say that. I am so grateful to you for spending time with me today, telling your story and helping us to think about helping others through similar challenges. So thank you again for being here, Maeve.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was fun.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share it with other women who can benefit from this conversation. Before we go, I want to share some additional resources with you. If you struggle with imposter syndrome and you want to manage it more effectively, I invite you to join my free Imposter Syndrome online challenge. Every day for 7 days, you'll get an email with self-reflection questions and exercises to help you better understand your own experience with imposter syndrome and how to navigate it more effectively. To join the free challenge, visit executivecareersuccess.com/imposter-syndrome-challenge. When you sign up, you'll immediately receive your first message. Also, if you're interested in joining a community of women who engage in candid conversations that generally aren't happening elsewhere, I invite you to join my Leading Women discussion group. On the first and third Thursday of every month at 12 p.m. Eastern, we meet virtually over Zoom to talk about questions or challenges related to career management, leadership development, and any other relevant topics such as imposter syndrome and confidence. It's always a great discussion with a great group of women. If you want to check it out, you're welcome to be my guest on a future call. Just reach out to me at kim@executivecareersuccess.com and I will share the call details with you. And if you want to join my newsletter to receive tips, insights, and updates, text Leading Women, all one word, to 66866. Finally, consider telling us your story. Contact me to learn more about how you can be a guest on the Impostor Syndrome Files. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.